these two questions I still have, they apply to this game as well.
This is a Terran one, I imagine.
Yes, this is the Terran game. It was about how to drop effectively, but I think we've identified a big problem.
Yeah, well, okay. I was going to be sure this question was about how to defend a cheesy Ling rush, but okay, asking how to drop effectively. Interesting. So this is really common, and I get this in coaching all the time, and this is why it's an important skill, no matter what level you're at, to watch your replays. So I had someone ask me yesterday when I was streaming, they said, is it important to watch your replays to improve? And I was like, yeah, of course. Because otherwise, you don't know what's happening in the game. And I was like, this isn't me saying you guys are bad at StarCraft, you don't know. I don't know what's happening in the game. I have an idea when a game finishes. I say, I think this is what happened in this game. But if I don't watch the replay, sometimes I open up the replay and I go, oh, that's not what happened at all. And this especially happens when I get angry. You guys have seen me who watch the stream a lot. I get angry when I lose sometimes. We all do. And it's usually because I've totally misread what happened in that game. And the players who never watch the replays will say, fucking lasers. Protoss are bullshit. Urgh. Now go to Reddit and post a forum post about how mules are imbalanced and Terran's broken, or Zerg has creep and the Banelings are bullshit and they don't need to micro. You know, you're going to find excuses, but often what happens is you totally misread what happened in the game. You misread your position and made some bad decisions. So watching replays is very important because it allows you to remind yourself what happened. So Wildcat with this replay has said, how do you drop effectively? My drops didn't work out in this game. But if he opened the replay, what he would have been asking was, how do I not lose my command center to a bunch of Zerglings at the start of the game and end up in a really shitty position from the start? Right? We might have some valid, observations about how we could drop better in this game. But realistically, if we want to talk about dropping and getting better at it, well, why are we looking at a game where we're starting off on the back foot, way from behind early on? That's something which is very common. People say, you know what, I struggle against Protoss Colossi. I just don't feel like there's any counter for Zerg against Colossi. They lose their third base to DTs at the start of the game and are way behind and never have the numbers. And it's nothing about the Colossi composition, it's just about the numbers. So misreading your losses is one of the biggest problems everybody has in StarCraft. And that's why it's so important to watch your replays and actually look at what really happened. So every time you guys see me load up a replay at the end of a loss, and I do it in wins as well, I'll often say things like, I just died to this big 55 drone roach timing. I think this was pretty all in. I don't think he, this felt so powerful. I don't think he had a good transition. I think if I was just a little bit safer, maybe gave up my third base and held on and didn't die, I could have won. And I load up the replay, and my opponent actually had 80 workers and double upgrades and like a Spire finishing behind it. And I was like, oh, I totally misread the play. No, I was dead either way. And then I backtrack and I remember that 4 minutes into the game, I took a lot of damage. And I go, oh, that's the important thing to fix. So you always want to look for the earliest mistake or the earliest moment in a game where things go off the handle. So looking at this particular game, it was a really rough start, right? It was a really rough start with this Ling rush. So let's go right back nice and early and try to figure out what was this build first of all. Now, one of the things I like to do, rather than look at this, a lot of people watch this from the Terran's view and say, how could I have spotted this? First of all, let's understand what the Zerg's build was. So what is the Zerg going to do? He's actually gone 14 Overlord, which is inefficient if you're going to go 14 gas, 14 pool, but that's okay. This is a very fast gas. Let's see, how's Ground Pounder going to do this? What league was this replay, by the way, guys?
Flat.
Those chips tasty? Listen, what flavor? What flavor are they?
Salty.
My man, we got some salty chips. Nice. So anyway, so this is like basically it's like a 14 gas 16. So it's not a particularly efficient build, but that's cool. So we can look at this and say, okay, so this player is going to build 4 Zerglings, run those across, 6 Zerglings. All right. Going to build a queen. Okay, so they're going to macro behind it, but they're going to invest in just 6 Zerglings? Okay. Super weird build. Our Reaper came across and saw this hatchery was pretty late. That's a very late hatch. No hatchery finished yet. And our Reaper ran in the main and started looking for things. So here's something I, as an experienced Terran player, could say, wait a second. Wait on. Whoa. We had so much warning of this. We had much more time to react. So what you're always looking for if you're not STV scouting, first of all, is your Reaper really needs to get over there ASAP. You should not be chilling on this high ground, right? You got to be really on top of that. Get that in there straight away. But whenever your Reaper first arrives, if that hatchery is finished and there's already like drones mining, that's a hatchery first. If the hatchery is just finishing as you get there, just finishing, that means it's like a 16 or 17 pool. This hatch is like 20 seconds from finishing. Oh my. That's what you say, oh my. You go full George Takei, you put your hand over your mouth and you try to defend at home. So immediately, anything, if the hatchery isn't finished, you go home with that Reaper straight away. And this is something you learn as a Terran player once you understand the Zerg builds, because any pool that's down earlier than a hatch first, there could be Zerglings running around the edge of the map. Very common maneuver. This is a weird one in that the Zergling speed. So the Reaper should go home immediately. And if your Reaper went back immediately, that Reaper's back just after 3 minutes, right? Oh no, oh, we're gonna lose that SCV, that's a shame. Oh, there's Ling speed, so your Reaper would try to jump up onto the high ground for safety. But basically what you'd be doing is very common. You'd say, I got my Reaper on 2, let's box a bunch of SCVs. Number 3, you'd lower this depot and you'd send those down. And you'd basically try to fight these Lings with a combination of the Reaper and the SCVs. Or, another thing, why are we building an add-on on the factory when there's Zerglings? We should just be building a Hellion, right? There could already be a Hellion almost out. But it's important to do one of two things. Whenever your opponent does an early rush on your natural as a Terran, you either immediately say, I can't defend that, and you cancel it and rebuild on the high ground, which you could have done 40 seconds earlier, 30 seconds earlier, or you pull SCVs and you fight it. And you've just got to be decisive and make one of those decisions. I like the SCV pull, because I think if you just pull plenty of SCVs, you can usually just wreck the Zerglings. Most people kind of, unless they're going crazy flood, like we know he's got an expansion, we know he's probably not gonna have that many, you know, we'd be able to do it. But instead we're trying to do this fancy Reaper micro, and then we're kind of like stuck back on one base. We still haven't rebuilt our expansion, right? So we haven't made a decisive adaptation to the push. So there's two things, guys. You either immediately pull and defend that natural, or you immediately cancel it and rebuild on the high ground. And either of those would have put White Cat in a much better scenario in this game. You guys agree?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Zerg did not macro very well behind it, so it's fine.
This is very common, right? Even up to high levels, it's like if your opponent does something that feels too strong, they probably don't have as much stuff behind it as you're used to. So it's good to stay confident and just try to kind of do some damage.
Especially Zerg, right? As Zerg, you can have like so few drones and just build units for like 1.5 minutes.
Yeah, it's often what happens in those games, right? Where you're kind of just defending and defending, and you're like, well, you know, I feel like maybe he had time to drone in the midst of this, but I'm just going to keep defending because there's a chance he just didn't build any workers. Now this here is like one of the fanciest drops of all time. So in terms of how to drop effectively, well, this is just fancy. This is just like, whoa, this is super fancy here. You can drop like this if you want to, but you probably want to drop in the mineral line. But let's look at this and let's look at the decision. So with any sort of attack, you always want to make an assessment. You get better at it with experience, where you say, okay, if they have enough defense, I just back away. A lot of people.
This is a queued up drop, I think.
Yeah, that was queued up as well, which is a mistake. So here's something you want to do, guys. Check this out. Oh, whoops. Sorry, there's the medevacs. Here we go. So what he did was he actually from home, he had picked up into the drops and he said, move here, shift, drop there. This is something you almost never want to do because it means you're going to get distracted doing macro, and then you're going to go, oh shit, the drop went in. I wasn't even looking at it. So sometimes you'll be a bit bad. Now, White Cat did look at it at the right time, so it was okay. But very quickly, seeing Queens there, what have we got for firepower in this drop? I think it's 8 Marines versus 3 Queens who all have transfused. You're not going to kill anything here. As White Cat, there's really only one decision, which is just get the hell out of there. Ground Pounder's in position, just leave, right? So if White Cat was watching this, flew in, saw the Queens, you wouldn't have even started dropping. Now, if you guys have the problem where you're trying to pick back up into the medevacs, and then they keep dropping as you're picking up into it, make sure you press stop with the medevacs selected. So if you've got everything selected, you just press stop, they'll stop dropping. Load your units up, fly away. And this is something you always want to get better at this over time is, oh, he's got the units there. That's cool. I've forced a response. And, you know, that is fine because if we look at the worker count, we're even on workers. So if White Cat simply kept those units alive, that would be amazing because then you could maybe rotate around, drop down here, try to set up your Widow Mines and like poke forward at that base, or just keep them alive and go home and just focus on establishing your expansion because White Cat's spending money really well. White Cat's getting up the production. But now we've given a lot of freedom to Ground Pounder. So Ground Pounder was able to shut down that push and feels a lot more comfortable, right? So in terms of how to drop effectively, in messy situations, you can queue up a drop to just go straight into the mineral line. And then, there's so much other stuff going on. You're just hoping it does damage. You're not even necessarily going to look at it unless you get a bit of free APM, right? But in these sort of situations where it's the only thing going on the map, you always watch that while it goes in. You make sure you pull it out if they've got the defense in position. And you just kind of say, you know what? With any attack, unless it's completely all in, if they've got the units in position, we know they've built enough defense, we just back off and wait till our army's a bit bigger. Wait till our units gather up a little bit. And that can be really effective. So, looks like White Cat's going to go for a big push here. No combat shields, but Stim is on the way. That's going to be finished soon. The army splits up here a little bit awkwardly. So one thing for White Cat is White Cat hasn't scouted on the map at all. Could have been moving into Banelings. Has got the Medivacs floating way ahead of the army. And here's the cardinal sin. Has saved up scans. Hasn't been dropping mules, but hasn't scanned. There we go. Fine. Okay, good. You always want to scan ahead of your army. I would not have scanned there. I would have scanned here. Because your opponent's army is usually between their natural and their third. So if we just did the scan there, we would have seen the army. But still, at least is scanning, sieging up the tanks. And let's look, where's the pre-spread for White Cat? So what you want to do whenever you're doing a push, guys, with Terran, box click, box click, box click. What White Cat's going to do is what 90% of Terran players through to the top of Diamond do, which is run their army around in a ball, and it's all going to die to Banelings. And once again, Pig's going to use his Warlock Seer Brain to send... Oh, he's pre-spreading! He's pre-spreading! Now, please don't do what 90% of Terrans do, White Cat, and he's going to clump everything up. No, he's not. He's not. Okay, so he does need to select his control group and stim everything, which he hasn't done. But the pre-spread did so much there. That was amazing. Crushes the army because he pre-spread. Oh, and then he clumps his whole army and A-moves it. No. Don't. No, and he's unsieged all of his tanks as well. No, White Cat, you had this team in the bag.
So basically, Zerg sent in like half the army, and the Terran thought that was the whole army, and it was time to push in.
No.
Baited.
Jebaited. This ground pounder Zerg is a tricky Zerg player, but this is very common, guys. And the thing is, you never. People say, "Oh, but how would he know that?" You just never clump your stuff up. All right.
Or scan ahead.
I would never even be this far on creep in the first place. I would have half of my army behind my siege tanks. And I would have like some bio up here. And if I want to poke forward, you know what I do? I box a few Marines, I stim them, and I run them forward. And I go, oh, he's still got a lot of stuff. You try to move back. And okay, well, how do we push in if we can't just run our bio in a ball? Well, that's how you throw games. So how do we win games? Because this is what every Terran player does. Every Terran. You grab the siege tank at the back. You go unsiege, shift, right click, shift siege. What you tell in that one order is the tank will unsiege, it'll move there, and then it'll siege up. As that one sieges up, we do the same with this one. Until we've got siege tanks in range of the hatchery, and then the Zerg has to come fight into our perfect pre-spread. 90% of Terran players' problem against Storm, against Banelings, is they get way ahead, and then they clump all their shit up and die to Banelings or Storm when playing Bio. This pre-spread was beautiful, just don't ruin the pre-spread, guys. Don't ruin the pre-spread. Don't get baited into just moving your whole army forward in a clump. Because we're not innovation, we're not going to have the godlike spreads and splits on the fly. Be patient, only move forward your siege tanks one at a time. Remember that your army actually grows stronger. Even though he's got more economy, and yes, he's building more units, the better your spread is as a Terran, the more power you have. Especially if you bring reinforcements across the map as well. Because of the way ranged units work, pre-spreads work, Terran works, the better your army is sieged up, and the bigger it grows, the stronger it gets. Even if your opponent's outproducing you, the positioning, the tech, the angling should favor the Terran player.
Just a thought. I don't know if this is correct or not, but
yeah,
I find that bio tank, it's actually good to have a lot of Marines behind your tanks, because like tanks are actually really good against Banelings.
Exactly. There's those funny fights, right, where the Zerg makes way too many Banelings and not enough Zerglings, and that brings us to a common question. How many Zerglings versus Banelings should you have? Versus Widow Mines, you actually you want to have like, you know, some banelings in the mix, right? But not too many. You don't want to have like a huge number of banelings because you want a lot of zerglings to be able to just surround and run and overwhelm the army and pull the Widowmine shots into their army. It's kind of the same with siege tanks. You just want enough banelings, so if the Marines stay in a clump, you kill them, right? So as long as you got enough banelings spread through your army, maybe 1 baneling for every 5 zerglings, that's enough, right? The moment you make 50 banelings, all you're doing is creating these big balls of banelings that the tanks will go, oh, I'll kill 8 banelings with a siege tank shot. I'll kill 8 banelings with a siege tank shot. And you're like, oh, this is not helping at all because the Marines are spread or they're behind the tanks. And the thing is, simply by having banelings in your comp, you force your opponent to have their units spread out, right? So it's like, as long as, well, you've got enough banelings to punish them if they clump up like this, but if they're not and they're spread, your zerglings will do the work. Your zerglings get on top of them so quickly, the siege tanks don't get a lot of time to siege you down from afar, and that's how zerglings work out so well. So GG's.
Okay, so in the start of the game, like, he built the Reaper, so the question to that is it really important to get that Reaper? Like, especially if you are already SCV scouting and knowing that you have like terrible Reaper skills, just lose it, over micro it, don't spend your money. Is it that important?
So as a new Terran off racer, can I try answering that question
Sure.
with my experience? So the Reaper, as a single unit, is super strong. Like against slow zerglings, against anything, a single Reaper is much better than like a Marine, and that Reaper will like keep you safe against like pull first or whatever, right? If you scout a pull first, then you want a Reaper. And now if you don't scout a pull first, you scout a hatch first, you still want to build that Reaper, and it just basically means that the Zerg can't take a third as easily. You don't have to do any fancy micro with it. You can just sit it outside of their base and like leave it there, and just go back to macroing. You don't have to do fancy stuff with it.
I think this is a really good point, right? Like, you don't need to just stare at the thing. The thing is, it gives you the chance to do so. But the thing is, this is the easiest way to practice splitting up your attention. Oh my god. Poor bio once again. All clumped up once again, all free spread. This is very common, guys. Very common. Listen, I was watching from the Zerg's point of view.
I'm watching it on the stream, oh my god.
So, back to that point, I think it's such a good way to practice your splitting up of your attention, right? The thing is, there are times in the early game where you've got nothing else to do. But it's for like 20 seconds, right? It's like 20 seconds of let's micro the Reaper. Well, why not? Let's do that. Sure. Let's make the Reaper. Let's go harass. But you do it for like 10-15 seconds at this very specific window in your build where you've already queued up everything else and you've got nothing else to do, right? The problem most players have is that they see innovation do it and they're like, oh, just gonna dance it around, blah, 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 I'm gonna kill a drone, rah! And they focus too much on the Reaper, right? So the Reaper, whilst yes, you don't need to go it, especially you know, if you're not that great at micro, it's a great tool to get you used to saying, okay, I've got 15 seconds, let's go in and kill a Zergling or two, or try to kill a drone, and then just pull it away. Even if there's no defense, pull it away. This is one of the best things for Terran players to practice, is having a preset moment where you back out with your aggression, no matter what's happening. And this is like against every Terran's instinct, because they're like, I love Beyond, he just runs in and never stops attacking. And it's like, you're not Beyond. You're always going to do better if you have like a specific window where you say, 20 seconds, focus on the micro. And the thing is, you're not perfect. You're going to screw it up. Sometimes you'll do 30 seconds. You're like, oh, I've got a bit of money at home. Oh, I forgot to start my Hellions or whatever. But then you look back at home and you do your macro and you do all that stuff. And then a little bit later, you say, okay, I've got a little bit of time to micro my drop when it goes in. You know what? Kill some drones. You know what? I've been microing this for a bit of time. I know my time's up. I got to go macro. Just load into the drop, fly away, even if there's no defense there. And this is the strangest thing for players to get used to. But it starts to get you used to saying, there's always a point where no matter how much shit you're killing, it's better to just go home and spend your money. And it's better to get that sort of rhythm down of always be doing both, swapping between the two tasks, right? No one does everything at once. No one can do that. Multitasking is a myth in the way most people think of it. It's about dividing your attention between things, right? Saying, I've done enough of this, let's do the other. So that's really huge. A few questions. Someone was saying, well, what are your thoughts about balance, Pig? Do you like the new changes? I do. There's my first impressions video linked in chat, guys. If anyone's asking about that later, please do just respond by typing !patch for them. It's got both the patch notes and my YouTube video going through them yesterday. Someone else was saying a few different questions. Is there a way to make medevacs follow your units without lifting them up? Let's hop out of this replay, by the way. Says Killshires. Yeah, you need to move command. So you have to actually press the hotkey for move and then left click on a unit. That's the only way to do that. I personally never use that. But yeah, if you really want to, you can. I honestly just stutter. I just keep them in my bio control group, and they kind of just move with my units while they're stutter stepping. Because otherwise, if you leave them on follow and you start stutter stepping backwards and they've got anti-air, all your medevacs end up in front of your army, and they will just get shot down unless you actually manually control click them and boost them behind your army. So most pro players like to just have them on their army group, and you just kind of, when you A move, they'll automatically heal anyway. So I wouldn't get too overcomplicated with your medevacs.